The stars over the plains of Beersheba were a constant reminder of a promise. For decades, Abraham had looked up at that glittering expanse and remembered the voice that told him his descendants would be just as numerous. But for most of those years, the promise felt like a cruel irony. Abraham and Sarah had grown old, their bodies weathering like ancient parchment, while their home remained silent, devoid of the laughter of a child. Then the miracle happened. Isaac was born the child of laughter. He was not just a son, he was the living proof that God's word was sovereign over biology and time. By the time Isaac reached his teenage years, he was the center of Abraham's world. He was the heir to the covenant, the one through whom the nations of the earth would be blessed. Which is why the command that came in the dead of night felt like a shattering of the universe itself. Take your son, your only son, whom you love Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. There was no explanation, no debate, just the crushing weight of a request that seemed to contradict everything Abraham knew about the heart of God. The script of Abraham's life changed in that moment. He didn't wake Sarah. He didn't tell the servants the true nature of the mission. He simply rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and began to chop the wood for the fire. Every strike of the axe against the wood must have felt like a strike against his own heart. Each piece of kindling he gathered was intended to consume the very promise he had waited a century to receive. The journey to Mount Moriah took 3 days. In the world of storytelling, 3 days is a transition, but in the heart of a father, it is an eternity. Imagine the silence of that walk. Abraham, a man who had spent his life talking to God, now found himself in a desert of divine silence. He walked behind his son, watching the way Isaac moved with the energy and strength of youth. He watched Isaac lead the donkey, perhaps humming a song or asking questions about the terrain. Every time Isaac looked back and smiled at his father, Abraham had to hold the mask of a leader while the soul of a father was screaming in agony. They walked through the heat of the day and camped under the cold stars of the night. 3 times the sun rose, and 3 times Abraham had to choose to take the next step. This is the essence of surrender. It is not a single decision made in a moment of religious fervor. It is 1,000 small decisions made in the face of impossible pain. Abraham wasn't just walking up a mountain. He was walking toward the end of his own understanding. He was being asked to trust the giver more than the gift. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He told his servants to stay behind. "I and the boy will go over there and worship," he said, and then added the most prophetic words of the journey, "and then we will come back to you." Even as he carried the knife and the fire, Abraham's faith was wrestling with the reality of the command. He believed in a God who could bring life from a dead womb, and he believed, perhaps, in a God who could bring life back from the ashes. As they began the final ascent, the weight shifted. Abraham carried the fire and the knife, the tools of death. Isaac carried the wood, the fuel for the sacrifice. It is a haunting image of a son bearing the weight of his own altar. Then came the question that broke the silence. "Father," Isaac asked. "Yes, my son. The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's voice didn't waver, though his hands lightly trembled. "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." They reached the summit. There was no divine intervention yet. There was no thunder or lightning. There was only the sound of stones being piled one on top of the other as they built the altar together. This was a partnership of faith. Isaac was no longer a small child. He was a strong young man. He could have easily overpowered his aged father. He could have run, but the scriptures suggest a profound, quiet submission. as Abraham explained the command as he bound his son's hands. Isaac chose to trust his father just as Abraham chose to trust his God. Abraham lifted the knife. In that split second, the test reached its apex. He had proven that he loved the Creator more than the covenant. He had surrendered the one thing he could not live without. Abraham, Abraham, the voice from heaven didn't just stop the knife. It shattered the tension of the last 3 days. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there, caught in a thicket by its horns, was a ram. Not a lamb, but a rammer, substitute, provided by the very hand that had asked for the sacrifice. Abraham named that place Yahweh-Jireh, the Lord will provide. But the story isn't just about a father and a son on a mountain in the desert. It is a shadow of a story that would take place 2,000 years later on a nearby hill called Calvary. There, another father would lead his only son up a mountain. There another son would carry the wood for his own sacrifice. But on that day there would be no voice to stop the knife. On that day, the father would not withhold his son because he was providing the ultimate lamb for the sins of the world. Abraham and Isaac walked down that mountain together, but they were not the same men who had walked up. They had learned that true worship is not about what we give to God, but about our willingness to hold nothing back. They had learned that when we surrender what we love most, we find that God is more than enough.